When Donald Trump told Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, "Sit down, girl," during a live House hearing, the room didn't gasp, it froze. Her response, calm and razor-sharp, left even his staunchest allies silent. The lights were bright, the cameras rolling. The House Oversight Committee hearing on federal transparency had dragged on for over 5 hours, but tension still charged the air. Reporters hunched over their phones, aides whispered. Everyone sensed something was coming. At the center table, Donald J. Trump sat thumbing through papers, unfazed, in his signature navy suit and red tie, every inch the man unaccustomed to being challenged, especially not by a black congresswoman from South Dallas with no patience for theatrics. Representative Jasmine Crockett, striking in a cobalt blazer and black-rimmed glasses, adjusted her mic and addressed him, voice level, eyes steady. "Mr. Trump," she said, flipping a page, "can you clarify why your 2019 and 2020 disclosures show such significant discrepancies in the valuation of your overseas assets?" Trump looked up, leaned back, and smirked. This was the moment he lived for. "I've been more transparent than anyone here," he replied, waving her off. "And frankly, your tone is disrespectful." Crockett didn't blink. "Respect isn't a tone, Mr. Trump," she replied. "It's earned." A murmur rippled through the room. Cameras zoomed in. Even C-SPAN's chat began to scroll faster. Trump, annoyed, flicked his hand in the air like swatting a gnat, and then he said it. "Sit down, girl." No gasps, just silence. The chairman paused mid-gavel. Aides stopped typing. Republicans shifted uncomfortably. Some looked away. Crockett said nothing at first. She blinked once, then again, letting the moment hang like thick smoke. Then, she leaned forward. "Let me explain something to you, Mr. Trump," she said, voice smooth and deliberate. "You may have spoken to women like that before, but I'm not here to serve you. I'm here to serve the truth. And if my questions make you uncomfortable, maybe that says more about your answers than my tone." The stillness deepened. A staffer behind her whispered, "Damn." She kept going. "And one more thing," she added, "your inability to engage with facts without resorting to dismissive language isn't strength, it's avoidance. And you're not avoiding me today." Trump didn't reply. He tapped his pen, lips parted, searching for a retort. None came. The chairman broke the silence. "Mr. Trump, please respond to the question." But it didn't matter anymore. This wasn't about tax records. It was about power, who wielded it, and who no longer accepted it without consequence. Inside media booths, producers scrambled. "Clip that," one barked. "It's going everywhere." Within minutes, the moment was clipped, shared, reposted Twitter, Facebook, TikTok. "Sit down, girl" trended globally, though not for the reasons Trump might have hoped. In Fort Worth, an elderly woman paused her ironing, eyes wide. "Lord, have mercy," she muttered. That girl just told him, but Crockett's words weren't just a comeback. They tapped into something deeper. The silence after wasn't confusion. It was recognition. No shouting, no desk pounding, just quiet, undeniable control. She sat calmly, flipping to her next page, as if Trump hadn't just hurled a phrase dripping with decades of condescension. Representative Monica Rayburn glanced over and exhaled. "That's how you handle it," she whispered. Across the aisle, Representative Neil Camden scribbled in his notebook. She just turned the room upside down. Trump's face had changed. The smirk was gone. His voice, hollow. "I'm just saying," he muttered. "There's a way to talk to people." No one answered. The chairman tapped the gavel, not to scold, but to move forward. "Let's proceed," he said. "Representative Crockett, you have the floor." And she did, in more ways than one. She resumed questioning, tone steady, ignoring the moment because she didn't need to acknowledge it. It had already landed. News vans were updating banners. "Trump tells Crockett, 'Sit down, girl,' during heated hearing." Producers cut from budget talk. "Run the full clip." In living rooms, people rewound and rewatched. At a bar in Columbus, 2 teachers sat stunned. Did he really just say that? One mouthed, "She handled it like a sniper." The other whispered. In a dorm room in Tempe, a political science major opened a thread. "Why this Crockett moment matters more than you think." By morning, it had 90,000 shares. Inside the Capitol, reporters gathered outside the chamber. But Crockett wouldn't be making statements, not today. She walked out flanked by aides, eyes forward. Someone shouted a question. She didn't stop. That night, her comms director Kiara Owens stared at her phone. 2 million views. Celebrities quoting her, "Civil rights leaders calling. They're calling it the line of the decade," Kiara said. Crockett didn't look up. "They can call it whatever they want," she said. "I call it Tuesday." She didn't want a seat at the table just to be seen. She wanted a bigger table because she was done shouting from the hallway. So when Jasmine Crockett won her seat, she sent her mother a simple note. "You told me to make my voice matter. I found a bigger mic." So when Donald Trump told her, "Sit down, girl," in front of the world, she wasn't shocked. She'd heard worse from judges, from police chiefs, from developers who assumed she was the assistant. But this time was different. Now, millions were watching. Girls who looked like her. Women who had been dismissed with the same lazy condescension. For decades, she didn't need to shout. She didn't need to slam her papers or storm out. She did what she always did. Cut straight to the truth and let it stand on its own. That's why the clip hit so hard. It wasn't just a viral moment. It was a culmination. A story that had begun long before in late-night court filings, city hall hearings, spreadsheets trying to save someone's home from eviction. Now, all that history had a platform too big to ignore. But the cameras only caught the moment. They didn't catch what came after. The hearing adjourned just after 5:30 p.m., but the real noise began when the feed cut out. Inside the committee room, aides rushed to pack up. Reporters fished for quotes from members slipping toward side exits. Trump was escorted out a side door, away from the growing press swarm outside. Behind the dais, Crockett calmly gathered her papers. No rush, no hesitation. A junior staffer handed her a bottle of water in silence. She nodded, took it, and walked out, still silent, still composed. Around her, the room buzzed with speculation. But she said nothing. Not yet. Down the corridor, Representative Elaine Brewster leaned against a marble column, whispering into her phone, "Yes, I heard it live." No. She didn't flinch. Yes, he really said that. 2 floors below, the press room was. Chaos. Journalists shouted over each other. Did Trump actually say "girl" on the record? Has Crockett issued a statement? Is she going on MSNBC tonight? In a nearby office, Trump was fuming. "She was disrespectful," he barked. "I was answering the damn question." No one pushed back. His PR team huddled by the window, debating. Do we release a statement? Do we spin it as a joke? No. Someone warned. Her tone was too sharp. She sounded serious, controlled. "If we try to make it banter, it'll backfire. She's got a courtroom mouth," an aide muttered. Trump overheard. "A what?" "Means she doesn't take the bait," the aide said. "She lets you walk into your own mess." Back in Crockett's office, her chief of staff Kiara paced, phone glued to her ear. CNN, BBC, NPR. Every outlet wanted comment. But Jasmine was still seated, still sipping her water. "I don't think she's going to play it that way," Kiara whispered. "She's not feeding the moment." She looked up. "You okay?" Jasmine finally spoke. "We didn't come here to go viral. We came to ask questions." But even she knew this was now bigger than the hearing. Outside the Capitol, protesters had already gathered. Signs read, "Respect Black women." T-shirts with her quote were already on Etsy. A reporter shouted as she exited, "Congresswoman Crockett, do you feel disrespected?" She paused, turned to the mic. "I feel focused." That clip alone became the morning headline. Conservative radio hosts scrambled to reframe the exchange as colloquial. She misunderstood. One host insisted. "But what about her tone?" Another snapped. But the story was slipping out of their control. Because it wasn't about tone anymore. It was about pattern. In progressive circles, the response was sharper. "Black women don't get to have bad days," one writer posted. "They get told to sit down no matter how calm, how qualified, how right they are." Crockett's inbox exploded. One message stood out. "You didn't raise your voice. You didn't back down. You didn't blink. My daughter just asked me your name. That means something. Thank you." She read it 3 times. Meanwhile, Trump's team wasn't going quiet. At a media war room in Arlington, they played the clip over and over. "She didn't yell," one aide said. "She didn't even look mad. That's the problem. So, we flip it," another said. "Say he was being casual. Say she made it a thing." An intern hesitated. "But, it doesn't sound casual." Silence. From Mar-a-Lago, watching via private feed, Trump leaned back. "They'll forget by next week," he muttered. "We just need something louder to knock it out of the headlines." The distraction plan launch, tweets, soundbites, spin. One senator posted, It wasn't offensive. It was political theater. She played to the cameras. Trump went on conservative radio. Regret? Nah. He laughed. She was going on and on. People are too sensitive. But it wasn't working. Crockett still hadn't responded beyond that single line outside the Capitol. And the silence made more noise than any statement could. That night on CBS, political analyst Trevor Langford broke it down. This isn't about a phrase. It's about a habit. About a man who thinks power excuses language and a woman who didn't flinch. Back in Texas, local news ran stories titled, "Who is Jasmine Crockett?" Viewers who had never heard her name were paying attention. Her team fielded media offers nonstop Today Show, NPR, Colbert. But Crockett was careful. This is about what he said, she told her staff. But it's also about how I responded. That's what matters. Online, the attacks escalated. Fake quotes, doctored videos, old footage misrepresented to paint her as hostile. But for every smear, 5 real clips showed her steady, calm, unshaken. In the Arizona Times, a young journalist wrote, "We don't ask men to make themselves smaller to be heard. We ask women to smile while being dismissed." Crockett didn't smile. She didn't yell. She corrected. And the correction landed louder than any scream ever could. Trump's defenders were growing louder, but they sounded more like men shouting in a room that had already moved on, because the real conversation had already begun. Crockett didn't have to lead it. She already sparked it. By day 3, the story was everywhere. Morning shows, late night, classrooms, podcasts. Conservatives shouted identity politics. Progressives called it accountability overdue. But in the middle of all that noise, something surprising happened. People started listening. It wasn't about tax law anymore. It wasn't even about Trump. It was about that moment, that sentence, and what it meant. In a high school in Birmingham, Alabama, a debate coach named Lorraine Reeves played the clip for her students, and this time, no one talked over it. She paused the video. "Tell me what you saw," she asked. A girl in the front row raised her hand. "He didn't expect her to answer like that," she said. Another added, "It's like he thought he was talking to someone who wouldn't respond at all." Heads nodded around the room. In Des Moines, Iowa, a retired librarian named Tom Beck posted a message to Facebook. It quietly went viral. "I'm 76. It began. I've lived through hearings, scandals, speeches, but this wasn't about left or right. This was about whether we keep letting people with power speak to others like they don't belong in the room." Over 20,000 people shared his post. In Phoenix, a woman named Farah Densley, who had never once voted in a midterm, uploaded a short video explaining why Crockett's response made her cry. Her voice cracked. "My daughter's going to grow up in a world," she said, "where she'll hear a line like that and know exactly what it means, but also know exactly how to answer." Even comedians joined the moment, not with punchlines, but perspective. On stage at the Hamilton show, comic Will Ortega said, "She didn't clap back. She didn't pop off. She told the truth, calm, clear, and that's what shook people." A black woman unmoved, telling the truth in a room that thought it could talk over her. Still, the division was sharp. Crockett's inbox overflowed. Thousands of emails poured in, most supportive, some ugly. One simply read, "You're everything wrong with this country. Sit down." Just like he said. She didn't reply. She never did with those, but it weighed on her staff. Late one night, Kiara, her communications director, scrolled in silence, then whispered, "It's always loudest when they feel seen." From across the room, Crockett answered, "Yeah, because silence protects them." By then, social media had adopted her both symbol and standard. Black women quoted her in captions. Young girls posted side-by-sides of Crockett and other barrier-breaking leaders. Twitter threads broke down, "Sit down, girl," like a legal case, evidence of how power speaks when it doesn't expect resistance. But it wasn't just commentary anymore. Something shifted when a group of middle-aged women in Spokane, Washington, organized a letter-writing campaign. More than 300 handwritten notes arrived by weeks, and gratitude in ink. Then came the poll numbers. An independent survey showed a rare spike in cross-party support. Voters aged 40 to 60, including nearly 40% of independents, said her response made them more interested in hearing her views on policy. That's when it was clear. This wasn't trending. This was resonating. In private, Crockett stayed grounded. She didn't cry. She didn't vent. But one night, she called her father. "You sounded like your mama in that hearing," he said. She laughed. She would have thrown her shoe. No, he replied. She would have made him hand it back first, a rare light moment in a heavy week, because even as America argued, riposted, dissected, one truth remained: Crockett hadn't asked for the moment. She just didn't run from it. But what no one expected was how one quiet answer could echo so loudly. 3 days after the hearing, something shifted. The conversation wasn't just about her anymore, or Trump.it expanded, stretched into parts of American life that rarely make cable news. People started talking, not reposting, not retweeting, talking. What does it mean to be heard when you're not the voice people expect? Especially in rooms built to ignore you? In a university auditorium in Boulder, Colorado, Professor Shelby Gaines played Crockett's clip for a packed lecture hall. This, she said, circling the word truth on the board, is what composure sounds like beside power. A student asked, why did it go so viral? I mean, he said worse. Professor Gaines nodded. Sometimes it's not the words, it's who they're said to, and who refuses to shrink when they are. Back in Dallas, Reverend Carl Winston preached without notes. They told her to sit down, he said, walking the aisles of his small church. But she sat in her truth. That church, that is resistance. At a black-owned coffee shop near South Lamar, regulars debated. She played it perfect. One woman said, stirring her tea. Didn't give them a soundbite, gave them a mirror. But what if she clapped back harder? Someone asked. No. A man said from the counter. You know why it hit? Because she didn't need to be louder to be stronger. Not everyone agreed. On cable news, some framed it as overreaction. One morning show guest suggested, maybe it's just how he talks. Shouldn't we give him the benefit of the doubt? That clip spread too, but was met with a wave of rebuttals. Because, while pundits debated, real stories surfaced. Women, especially black women, shared their own, dismissed in meetings, interrupted mid-sentence, called girl by men with more power, but less experienced. An assistant principal in El Paso posted a video. I've heard that phrase 5 times in my career, she said. Never from students, always from men in suits. A healthcare executive in Portland wrote an op-ed titled, I was told to calm down, girl, during a budget meeting. I was the CFO. It wasn't sudden outrage. It was long-held exhaustion finally given voice. Through it all, Crockett didn't play the star. She declined national interviews, refused to frame herself as a victim. Her only public comment came during a Q&A in Austin. Do you think he meant to be disrespectful? The reporter asked. She paused, then said, I think intent matters less than impact. And if someone doesn't understand the weight of their words, maybe they shouldn't be carrying them in public. That line landed just as hard. In Detroit, civil rights organizers launched Speak It workshops for young women of color. The first flyer read, you don't have to yell to be powerful. Just be clear. In Tallahassee, a high school junior named Jaya quoted Crockett before advocating for a student-led ethics committee. The room gave her a standing ovation, and in the background, political analysts began whispering about 2028. Not because Crockett said anything, just because something had shifted. That night, as Crockett and Kiara reviewed emails, Kiara smiled. You know they're putting your quote on mugs now? Crockett barely looked up. Hope they spell it right. You're not moved by any of this? Crockett shrugged. I'm moved that more people are listening. Not to me, to each other. What neither of them expected was the message waiting in her inbox that night. Buried between media requests was an email. Subject, thank you from Tulsa. No signature, no fanfare, just a note from someone named Clara Bishop. Kiara opened it, expecting another kind word. Instead, she froze. Dear Representative Crockett, I watched the hearing. I've watched it 5 times. I'm 68 years old. I've never written to a politician in my life. When he told you to sit down, I heard my high school principal in 1973 say, you're not the kind of girl who gives speeches, but when you looked up and answered him without yelling, without pretending it didn't happen, I felt 17 again. I felt like I mattered. You didn't just speak for yourself, you spoke for every woman ever told to lower her voice when her truth made others uncomfortable. Thank you. With deep respect, Clara Bishop, Tulsa, Oklahoma. Kiara didn't forward it. She just sat with it. The next morning, she handed Crockett her phone. Read this, she said quietly. Crockett read it, sat still. Should I respond? Kiara asked. Crockett shook her head. No, I want to meet her. 3 days later, they arranged a quiet visit. No press, No cameras, just a public library in downtown Tulsa. When Claire arrived, wearing a tan coat and holding a well-worn notebook, Crockett stood and smiled. "I'm not here as a congresswoman today," she said. "Just Jasmine." Claire smiled back. "And I'm not 68 today. I'm 17. You gave me that." They talked for over an hour. No staff, no cameras, no curated quotes. Clara told stories. Growing up in segregated neighborhoods, watching leaders rise and fall, being passed over for promotions by men she'd trained. "I stopped raising my hand," she said quietly. "Figured there wasn't much point." Crockett leaned in, listening, asking questions. At one point, Clara pulled out a folded clipping of Shirley Chisholm. "When I was little, this was the woman we thought would break it all open." Crockett nodded. "She did. She cracked it. Now we keep widening the gap." When the visit ended, they hugged. No press, no statement. Just a moment between two women. Clara's granddaughter, who had driven her to the library, snapped a photo, the two of them laughing by the front window. Later, she posted it with a simple caption, "My grandma met her hero today. They didn't talk politics. They talked truth." The image spread like wildfire. By week's end, it had been shared by Ava DuVernay, Trissy Ellis Ross, and Sherilyn Afil each, adding reflections on legacy, lineage, and quiet courage. Clara Bishop, who'd never had a social media account, became a trending name. CNN picked up the story. The headline read, "The letter that said everything without a microphone." Requests poured in for interviews. Clara declined them all. She wrote only one thing, a column for the Tulsa Sentinel titled "The Day I Felt Heard." She didn't describe Crockett as a politician, but as a mirror held up to a nation too used to looking away. Meanwhile, Crockett released no press statement, no campaign post. When asked about the meeting in an interview weeks later, she simply said, "Some moments belong to the people who live them, not the people who watched." That line became a headline itself. The entire exchange, one letter, one meeting, one photo, reminded people, real change doesn't always come from the biggest stage. Sometimes, it starts with a quiet reply in someone's inbox read by a person who thought her voice had been forgotten. But as that story settled into hearts across the country, another shift was already underway, this time inside the institution where it all began. The House of Representatives doesn't move quickly, not for outrage, not for optics, not even for its own reputation. But this time felt different. 1 week after the exchange, the Ethics Committee quietly convened. No cameras, no leaks. Just 12 members from both parties watching the same 47-second clip again. "Sit down, girl." Pause. Crockett's reply. Silence. Even those jaded by spin admitted it couldn't be ignored. This wasn't just bad PR. It was a moment that made the entire chamber feel complicit. Some wanted to let it pass. Others, especially those facing tight re-elections, pushed for a statement condemning disrespectful language aimed at any member, regardless of gender or background. It wasn't much, but it was a crack. Whispers of reform followed, procedural boundaries, clearer expectations for witnesses, even a proposal for mandatory briefings for former presidents who testify, because apparently, this is where we are now. Outside politics, the ripple continued. Crockett was invited to speak first at Stanford School of Government, then Harvard Law, and finally at a small community college in Jackson, Mississippi. She accepted all three. T. Stanford, she began, not with the hearing but with her first landlord case as a public defender. These people weren't waiting for headlines. They were waiting for someone to speak plainly, to listen, to make room for truth in rooms that weren't built for them. At Harvard, she spoke about tone, how women of color are told their voices are too loud even when they whisper, that their questions are too aggressive even when they're fair. In Jackson, she broke from her notes. "What do you do when someone tells you to sit down?" she asked, politely, cruelly, quietly. A student in the front row replied, "You stand anyway." Crockett smiled. "Exactly. Even if your knees shake." Back in DC, younger members began borrowing her language not as mimicry, but as permission. Suddenly, being direct didn't seem abrasive. Being clear didn't seem dangerous. Crockett stayed focused. She introduced 2 bills, one on data transparency in federal contracts, another on emergency protections during detentions. Neither had anything to do with the hearing, but both were rooted in the same principle. Truth works best in daylight. Behind the scenes, Trump was still fuming. A fundraiser in Pensacola. He called the hearing a setup, said the clip had been twisted, said Crockett had an attitude. When a donor asked if he regretted what he said, he laughed and changed the subject. But the world moved on. Crockett's office kept grinding. Her team barely had time to open mail, let alone sift through the flood of invitations. Still, they noticed something had shifted. The tone of the messages. It wasn't just praise or politics. It was reflection. One came from a woman in Santa Fe. I've worked in finance for 20 years. I've been called girl more times than I can count. I never said anything. But after watching you, I walked into my boss's office and told him to use my name. Just my name. That felt like a win. Another came from a teenage boy in Oregon. I showed your video to my mom. She cried. I didn't get it at first. Then she told me stories. Now I do. Thank you. Crockett read every one. She didn't save the headlines. She saved the letters. But even as policies were debated and stories shared, one question remained. What does respect look like when the cameras are off? When the clip fades from trending lists? When no one is watching anymore? Because the moment didn't vanish. It stuck. Not because it was loud, but because it was clear. In the months that followed, Crockett never once referred to the hearing as a viral moment. She never called it historic, never tried to spin it into a brand. She knew better. Real change doesn't live in headlines. It lives in quiet rooms, in conversations, in choices people make about how to show up. So she kept showing up, to hearings, to neighborhood meetings, to church basements and strip mall town halls. She answered questions about housing and transit, like the viral moment, never happened. And that's what made people respect her more. Not the clapback, not the fame, the steadiness. She didn't turn the moment into a logo. She let it be a reference point, proof that you can hold your ground without making your voice a weapon. A teacher in Flagstaff said it best during a parent forum. My daughter watched that video. She didn't see a woman being disrespected. She saw a woman respond like she knew who she was. That matters. In an age of overreaction, Crockett's calm became radical. Because here's the truth. There are still too many rooms in this country where respect is unevenly distributed. Too many tables where some are expected to stay quiet. Too many conversations where power expects obedience, not honesty. But moments like this don't just expose the cracks, they show us who's ready to stand without flinching. Crockett didn't win a battle that day. She didn't destroy anyone or shut down anything. She did something harder. She reminded us what strength looks like. It's not always volume. It's not always fire. Sometimes it's stillness. Sometimes it's letting someone show their hand while you hold your ground. Sometimes it's simply saying, you don't get to talk to me like that. Simple, clear, undeniable. So what's the takeaway? Maybe it's this. If you know who you are, you don't need to prove it. You just need to be it. When someone tries to shrink, you don't match their energy. Hold your own, because people will notice. They'll remember how you stood, how you didn't flinch, how you spoke without cruelty but with absolute clarity, and that will stay with them. So whether you're in a courtroom, a classroom, a boardroom, or a hearing on national TV, speak with purpose. Ask questions that matter, and if someone tries to diminish you with one sentence, answer with one that echoes longer, because that's how truth travels. And if this story moved you, if it reminded you of someone, or of yourself, or of a moment you stayed silent when you should have spoken, don't let it end here. Share it. Start the conversation, because we're not here for the noise. We're here for what matters.